tensions with China grow. The Biden administration formalizes genocide declaration against Beijing. So you mean to tell me that at the same time while we're sitting here sitting there signing executive orders, giving them protections and money and everything, at the same time they know that China is committing genocide. The Biden administration declared China's treatment of Muslims a genocide in an annual human rights report Tuesday, formalizing its dire assessment of a campaign of mass detention and sterilization of minority groups in the Xinjiang region. And I'm gonna tell the Biden administration, pot, meat, kettle. How you gonna talk about the Chinese when you've been doing what you've been doing to black people for how many hundreds of years? And that's basically what the Chinese are saying. Don't talk about, we close a blind eye to what you do to the Negroes. And we're gonna turn a blind, and you better turn a blind eye to how we treat our Negroes and our Muslims here, and whoever the hell else we want to treat. Don't you tell us what to do. And that's basically what the Chinese are saying. The move comes amid a sharp plunge in relations between the world's two largest economies, following a tense meeting of top diplomats in Alaska, and underscores the Biden administration's willingness to spotlight atrocities, regardless of the impact on sensitive bilateral relationships. So here's my thing: where are they highlighting this? Because they ain't talking about it on mainstream media at all. You got to watch maybe Bloomberg TV to hear this side of what's going on in government. Because they're definitely not telling you on CNN. They keep telling us about what we're doing, right? Genocide and crimes against humanity occurred during the year against the predominantly Muslim and other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang, reads the report. In an unveiling document, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said human rights were going in the wrong direction in every region of the world, including this one, calling out attacks on freedoms in Russia, Uganda, Venezuela, Ethiopia, Belarus, and elsewhere. And how you gonna call out all of them places and you don't call out what's happening in Minnesota? Blinken sought to demonstrate a clear break with the Trump administration's approach to human rights by sharply rebuking the commission set up by then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that authorized religious liberty and property rights while dismissing LGBTQ and abortion rights. There is no hierarchy that makes some rights more important than others, Blinken said. Past unvalid statements that suggest a hierarchy, including those offered by a recently disbanded State Department Advisory Committee, do not represent a guiding document for this administration. And here's my thing. There's a documentary on YouTube about the U.S.'s involvement in China's current population. See, this is the perfect time to introduce this. China right now is having a problem because they don't have any women. China's current population is void of women. Therefore, how can you procreate without women? So it's not just that China is overpopulated. They are overpopulated with men. That is why they are reaching out to every corner of the globe, because there are no women in China. Why are there no women in China? Because Nixon was giving out money to different countries to commit genocide in their country. But he didn't just tell you, oh, you got to commit genocide. What he did was he gave it to you in a way that aligned with your cultural norms. So in China, they don't like girl children.
Kidnapping of little girls are not uncommon in China. A son's marriage is expensive because the bride's family expect expensive engagement gifts. For this reason, parents have little girls kidnapped. They then raise the girl together with their son. And when they've reached adulthood, they are married to one another.
They don't want to have girl children. They would rather have boy children. So what Nixon did was give them money to introduce abortion and to release propaganda into their communities about abortion.
US President Richard Nixon and Secretary of State Henry Kissinger arrived in Beijing in 1972. It was a historic meeting with Mao Zedong to discuss the balance of power and a mutual commitment to world peace.
There is no reason for us to be enemies. Neither of us seeks domination over the other. Neither of us seeks to stretch out our hands and rule the world.
But the Americans were worried about the growth of Chinese power and the spread of communism, and the fact that Chinese population growth seemed unstoppable. Nixon's visit opened the floodgates for Western family planners. The Chinese government had a sympathetic ear for them. Ma's successor, Deng Xiaoping, introduced the one-child policy. Millions were trained as lay health workers, the so-called barefoot doctors. Their mission? Distributing contraceptives all over the country and ensuring that couples only had one child. Family planning became a matter of state. If anyone expected a second child, they faced draconian punishments. The government used graffiti on building facades to warn people to toe the line.
You can beat it out, you can kill it, you just cannot give birth to it.
In spite of media reports of forced sterilization and abortions, the West continued to donate money to the Chinese population program. At first, this only came from organizations like the Ford Foundation. But in 1979, even the United Nations Population Fund gave $50 million to the Chinese government. Employee of IPPF, one of the donor organizations, sounded the alarm.
I think that in the not-too-distant future, this will blow up into a major press story, as it contains all the ingredients of sensationalism. Communism, forced family planning, murder of viable fetuses, parallels with India, etc. And when it does blow up, it's going to be very difficult to defend.
But the warnings were not only ignored. The UN Population Fund also presented China with an award for outstanding contributions regarding birth control.
They decided to honor the leader of China's coercive population control program, a Chinese general, who had presided over the most egregious period in the entire history of that program. And they chose to honor Indira Gandhi, who was responsible for what until then was the worst population program of all, the emergency period program in India.
Affluent Americans started a new movement. Together, they wanted to curb the large numbers of children worldwide. Most of them were men, from well-known scientists to the super-rich, like John D. Rockefeller III. They were people with influence and connections to the highest levels of the American government. Their foundations still continue to exist today. The Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Population Council. They triggered a rising tide of fear of a population explosion that soon also spread to other countries, and they formed the head of worldwide measures taken to decimate the population of the impoverished. Was the UN Population Fund simply the puppet of its benefactors? 40 years after these population policies supported by the West, over 30 million Chinese men remain involuntary bachelors because of the shortage of women. This is why millions of unemployed men from rural areas move to the cities.
They gave them money to institute the one-child rule. And then as a result of the one-child rule, they made abortion legal. Right? Because they said we have too many Chinese. The U.S. told them there's too many Chinese. So they decided, okay, we do the one-child rule. If we get this money, so we can, try to catapult ourselves into the next age. Because China was extremely rural. They were behind everybody else. So they took this money from the U.S. and they instituted the one-child rule. They made abortion legal. So people only had one child. So the child that they would choose to keep would be the boy child. So now, 40 years later, they have a country full of boys. They are the grandparents are so desperate they have like little meetups where they go to like Korea and other places to try to meet up with people and find a woman for their male children.
I'm here for the second time today. I'm looking for the right girl for my son. Many people have come up to me. We exchanged phone numbers and information. The mothers will now ask their daughters if they're interested in my son, and then we'll talk on the phone. We parents help our children to establish contact.
These are mothers who only have one son because they were permitted to only have one child. This was the Chinese strategy for population control.
Now, if you got a country full of aging men with no women, how can you ensure the next generation?
40 years after these population policies supported by the West, over 30 million Chinese men remain involuntary bachelors because of the shortage of women. This is why millions of unemployed men from rural areas move to the cities.
So even though it sounds crazy, you know, everybody wants to sit here and talk about, and I'm, like I said, I didn't vote for Trump and I ain't no Trump supporter. But this article wants to point and say that Trump was doing a bad thing by not giving them abortion rights. But in actuality, it was them introducing abortion rights to their citizens that messed up their population. The China section of the report says the genocide against minority groups in Xinjiang continues and includes the arbitrary imprisonment of other severe deprivation of physical liberties and more than 1 million civilians, forced sterilization, coerced abortions, and more restrictive application of China's birth control policies, rape, torture, and a large number of those arbitrarily detained, forced labor, and the imposition of draconian restrictions on freedoms and religion or belief, freedom from expression, and freedom of movement. That's what they charging the Chinese with. Pot, meat, kettle. Beijing has ferociously denied the accusations of genocide and sought to underscore the mistreatment of Black Americans and Washington's destabilization of the wars in the Middle East. They saying basically the same thing, pot, meat, kettle. Pompeo first officially declared a genocide in Xinjiang during the waning days of the Trump administration. Blinken affirmed Pompeo's assessment during his confirmation hearing, but the word's inclusion in Tuesday's report formalizes the outlook as an official U.S. government assessment. Using the term genocide in the report indicates profound concern in the administration about the appalling Chinese government human rights violations against these are specific groups of people and the names I can't say, okay, because I'll try. Uyghurs, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, and Turkic communities, said Sophie Richardson, I tried, okay, a Chinese expert at Human Rights Watch. The move may also put further pressure on the Biden administration to punish China for its alleged actions. Oh, they're going to punish China? When? Because it seems like they keep giving their citizens over here all kinds of extra benefits and privileges, and they are a protected class. So when? Whether it's China, Russia, or anyone else, we're not standing against any of those countries, Blinken said. We're not trying to, for example, contain China or keep it down. What we are about is standing up for basic principles. I can't even get it out, child, because it's such a joke. What we are about is standing up for basic principles, basic rights, and rules based on international order. Shut your...
US President Lyndon B. Johnson attached conditions for receiving development aid, one of them being that recipient countries must reduce their population. It was a time of drought and starvation in India. The president spoke on the phone with his Secretary of Agriculture.
You just put out this morning instructions to all your people. If the president says any future allotments, he wants to know what we give, and Exhibit A, he wants to know what we get. So let's evaluate that too. And I know the first sentence will be, we feed a lot of hungry children. I know that, so I don't need to be told. But just tell me what else we get out of it. Usually we just get kicked in the pants. That's what she does to us.
He stopped food deliveries until Indian President Indira Gandhi bowed to the demands. Accusations were made that the West had imperialistic intentions with its population control projects. A Department for Population Control was founded at the United Nations in 1969, the UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund. Through this ostensibly neutral path, Western governments channeled millions into population control in developing countries. The major donors, besides the United States, were Sweden, Great Britain, Germany, and Switzerland. Now, history is repeating itself. The UN Population Fund still uses 60% of its aid for family planning. And once again, private foundations demand population reduction.
What makes me nervous that just as in the 1950s and 60s, it was the Rockefeller and Ford Foundation that issued marching orders to people all over the world. It makes me nervous when I hear it's the Gates Foundation now, because of its money, that's playing a preponderant role in global public health. Similarly, when back in the 1950s and 60s, you had leaders from all over the world agreeing that population growth was a crisis, right? And agreeing that the United Nations had to implement crash programs. It makes me nervous now when people talk about the crisis of climate change and how it is we might even have to engage in crash programs.
Today, Africa is the main focus for population control. The World Bank and the UN Population Fund are currently pumping millions into family planning on the second largest continent. And a large American corporation is supplying the ultrasound devices.
How China's outrage machine kicked up a storm over H&M. Did y'all even know this was going on? They're not talking about this at all. Okay. When the Swedish fast fashion giant H&M said in September it was ending its relationship with a Chinese supplier accusing of using forced labor, few Chinese social media accounts dedicated to the textile industry took note. But by and large, the moment passed without fanfare. Half a year later, Beijing's online outrage machine sprang into action. This time, its wrath was unsparing. The Communist Party's youth wing denounced H&M on social media and posted an archival photo of slaves on a Mississippi cotton plantation. Official news outlets piled on with their own indignant memes and hashtags. Patriotic web users carried the message across far and varied corners of the Chinese internet. Within hours, a tsunami of nationalist fury was crashing down upon H&M, Nike, Uniqlo, and other international clothing brands, becoming the latest eruption over Chinese policies in western region of Xinjiang. The same town that they are saying that the U.S. is saying is committing genocide. You see where I'm going? Okay, I'll put it all together. Yes, Xinjiang, a major cotton producer. The crisis the apparel brands now face is similar to many foreign businesses in China. The Communist Party for years have used the country's giant consumer market to force international companies to march in step with its political sensibilities, or at least not to contest them openly. But the latest episode has illustrated Chinese government's growing skill at whipping up storms of patriotic anger to punish companies that violate this pact. In H&M's case, the timing of the furor seemed dictated not by anything the retailer did, but by sanctions imposed on Chinese officials last week by the United States, the European Union, Britain, and Canada connected to Xinjiang. Why aren't we hearing about this on the news? The hate fest part is not sophisticated. It's the same logic they followed going back decades, said Zhao Qiang, a research scientist at the School of Information at the University of California, Berkeley, and the founder of Chinese Digital Times, a website that tracks Chinese internet controls. But their ability to control is getting better, he said. Now remember, the head of the CIA said that a lot of our collegiate institutions have been infiltrated. And they said this one is at the University of Berkeley. They know how to light up those ultra pro-government nationalist users, Mr. Zhao continued. They are getting very good at it. They know exactly what to do. On Monday, a spokesman for China's foreign ministry, Zhao Liang, rejected the notion that Beijing had led the boycott campaign against H&M and other brands. These foreign companies refused to use Xinjiang's cotton purely on the basis of lies, Mr. Zhao said in a news briefing. Of course, this will trigger the Chinese people's dislike and anger. Does the government even need to incite and guide this? After Communist Youth League ignited the outrage on Wednesday, other government-backed groups and state outlets fanned the flames. They posted memes proposing new meanings behind the letters H&M. The official Jianghu news agency posted an illustration depicting the Better Cotton Initiative, a group that had expressed concerns about forced labor in Xinjiang, as a blindfolded puppet controlled by two hands that were patterned like an American flag. The buzz quickly drew notice at Beijing's highest levels. On Thursday, a foreign ministry spokesperson held up a photo of slaves in an American cotton field during a news briefing. Here's what I want you guys to understand, right? When Chinese or when Asian people act like they don't know what we've been through in this country, they know. They know enough to spit it back at the U.S. government when the U.S. government is accusing them of doing what they do. When the U.S. government is accusing China of slavery, all of a sudden the Chinese know what we've been through then. But when they're here and they sitting here and abusing us and beating our women in the nail shops with sticks and throwing acetone into their faces, they act like, oh, we don't know we didn't have anything to do with what happened here in your country. We don't know what happened to you. Don't believe the lies. They know exactly what happened here. And that just proves it. On Thursday, a foreign ministry spokesperson held up a photo of slaves in an American cotton field during a news briefing. The messages were amplified by people with large followings, but largely non-political social media presences, okay? Today's China is not one that just anyone can bully, he wrote to his nearly 7 million followers. We do not ask for trouble. We are not afraid of trouble either. A fashion influencer named Wei Ya held a live video event on Friday hawking products made with Xinjiang cotton. In her Weibo post announcing the event, she made sure to tag the Communist Youth League. Okay? See how they coming together and using their social media to do such? But they're also not being suppressed. Not on this level anyway. On this topic, I should say. By Monday, news sites were circulating a rap video that combined the cotton issue with some popular recent lines of an attack on Western powers. How can a country where 500,000 have died of COVID claim the high ground? On Weibo, a user posted a lushly animated video that he said he had worked through the night to make. It shows a white hooded men pointing guns at black cotton pickers and ends with a lynching. You see what I'm saying? When they sit in your face and act like they don't know what we've been through, they know. They don't think you know that they know. So start calling them on their bullshit. We know you know. Don't sit there and act like you don't know. They said they made that, complete with the lynching. These are your foolish acts. We would never, a caption reads. Less than 2 hours after the user shared the video, it was reposted by Global Times, a party controlled by a newspaper known for its nationalist tone. Many web users who speak up during the campaigns motivated by genuine patriotism, even if China's government does pay some people to post party line comments. Others, such as the high traffic hungry blog accounts derided in China as marketing accounts, are probably more pragmatic. They just want the clicks. In the moments of the mass fever, it can be hard to say where official propaganda ends and opportunistic profit seeking begins. I think the boundary between the two is increasingly blurred, said Xinjing Shang, an assistant professor of politics at Queen's University, Belfast, who studies Chinese internet discourse. Nationalistic topics sell. They bring in a lot of traffic, Professor Zhang saying. Official accounts and marketing accounts, they come together and all take part in marketing nationalism. Chinese officials are being careful not to let their anger get out of hand. According to tests conducted by the Chinese Digital Time, internet platforms have been diligently controlling search results and comments related to Xinjiang and H&M since last week. An article in Global Times urged readers to resolutely criticize those like H&M that make deliberate provocations, but at the same time stay rational and beware of pretend patriots joining the crowd to stir up hatred. One beauty blogger, I thought this was very interesting. One beauty blogger told her nearly 100,000 Weibo followers that she had been contacted by a woman who said she was in Xinjiang. The unnamed woman said that her father and her other relatives had been locked up and that the foreign news reports about mass internment camps were true. Within hours, the blogger apologized for the bad impact her post made. She got off code and they checked her. Don't just support Xinjiang cotton. Support Xinjiang people too, another Weibo user wrote. Support Xinjiang people walking the streets and not having their phone and ID checked. Who are you talking about? The post later vanished. Its author declined to comment, citing concerns for his safety. Weibo did not respond to a request for comment. Now I know what you're asking. What's the deal with the cotton in Xinjiang? What's it? Because we already saw that they were saying that they were committing genocide on the Muslim people in that Chinese city of Xinjiang. So now we see that there's some issue with cotton going on, right? Okay, let's read about that. What is going on with China Cotton and all these clothing brands? Last week, calls for cancellation of H&M and other Western brands went out across the Chinese social media as human rights campaigns collided with cotton sourcing and political gamesmanship. Here's what you need to know about what's going on and how it may affect everything from your t-shirts to your trench coats. What's all this I'm hearing about fashion brands and China? Did someone make another dumb racist ad? No, it's much more complicated than an offensive and obvious cultural faux pas. The issue centers on Xinjiang's region of China and allegations of forced labor in the cotton industry. Allegations denied by the Chinese government. Last summer, many Western brands issued statements expressing concerns about human rights in their supply chain. Some even cut ties with the region altogether. Now, months later, the chickens are coming home to roost. Chinese citizens are reacting with fury, charging the allegations are an offense to the state. Leading Chinese e-commerce platforms have kicked off major international labels off their sites, and a slew of celebrities have denounced their former foreign employers. Why is this such a big deal? The issue has growing political and economic implications. On the one hand, the pandemic continues to roil global retail. Consumers have become more attuned to who makes their clothes and how that they are treated, putting pressures on brands to put their values where their products are. On the other, China has become ever more important sales hub to the fashion industry, given its scale to the fact that there are less disruptions than any other key markets like Europe. Then, too, international politicians are getting in on the act, imposing bans and sanctions. Fashion has become a diplomatic football. This is the perfect case study of what happens when market imperatives come up against global morality. Tell me more about Xinjiang and why it's so important. Xinjiang is a region in northwest China that happens to produce about a fifth of the world's cotton. It's home to many ethnic groups, especially the Uyghurs, a Muslim minority. Though it's officially the largest of China's 5 autonomous regions, which in theory means it has more legislative self-control than other central governments, has been increasingly involved in the area, saying it must exert its authority because of local conflicts with the Han Chinese, the ethnic majority, who have been moving into the region. This has resulted in draconian restrictions, surveillance, criminal prosecutions, and forced labor camps. As a predominantly Muslim Turkic group, Uyghur population within Xinjiang members over just 12 million, according to official figures released by Chinese authorities. As many as 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities have been restrained and become model workers obedient to the Chinese Communist Party via coercive labor programs. At least since 2016, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Axios, and other published reports connected Uyghurs in forced detention to supply chains of many of the world's best-known fashion retailers, including Adidas, Lacoste, or however you say that, Lacoste, H&M, Ralph Lauren, and the PHV Corporation, which owns Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, and many other brands, reassess their relationships with Xinjiang-based cotton suppliers. In January, the Trump administration banned imports from cotton from the region, as well as other products made from the material, declared what's happening genocide. At the time, the Workers' Rights Consortium estimated the material from Xinjiang was involved in more than 1.5 billion garments imported annually by Americans and American brands and retailers. That's a lot. How do I know if I'm wearing a garment made in Xinjiang cotton? You don't. The supply chain is so convoluted and subcontracting so common that it is hard for brands themselves to know exactly where and how every component of their garment is made. So if this has been an issue for over the year, why is everyone in China freaking out now? It isn't immediately clear. One theory is that because of the ramp up in political brinksmanship between China and the West. On March 22nd, Britain, Canada, the European Union, and the United States announced sanctions on China officials escalated of the treatment of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. In 2019, for example, Yang Mi, the Chinese actress and Versace ambassador. Here's what I want people to understand, because I think this is a common misconception that a lot of people usually say about us to put us in a negative light. We are not the only ones who are slaves to labor, to labels. When it comes, I lived in California and they buy a lot of labels. You go down to those outlets on the weekends and it is full of them and they are standing on top of you all the time. It's full of Asians of all nationalities. They are out there shopping, buying all this Versace and all this stuff. So we're not the only ones that are slaves to these labels. Now, here's the difference. In 2019, for example, Yang Mi, the Chinese actress and Versace ambassador, publicly repudiated the brand when it made the mistake of creating a t-shirt that listed Hong Kong and Macau as independent countries, seeming to dismiss the One China policy and Central and Taiwan separately. Lu Wang, the Chinese supermodel, immediately distanced herself from the brand. The difference is they didn't even have these brands put blackface or Asian face on a shirt. The difference is they didn't even have these brands put blackface or Asian face on a shirt. It didn't go that far. It's just the fact that they made a mistake listing Hong Kong as an independent nation. And that alone was enough for them to repudiate the brand and cut ties.
What do influencers have to do with all this? Influencers in China wield even more power over consumer behavior than they do in the West, meaning they play a crucial role in legitimizing brands and driving sales. When Tao Lang, otherwise known as Mr. Bags, did a collaboration with Givenchy, for example, the bag sold out in 12 minutes. A necklace bracelet set he made with Qeelin reportedly sold out in 1 second. There were 100 made. That's why H&M worked with Victoria's Song, Nike with Wang Yibo, and Burberry with Zhou Dongyu. But Chinese influencers and celebrities are also sensitive to pleasing the central government and publicly affirming their national values, often performatively choosing their country over contracts.
And what happened to the video games? Tencent removed 2 Burberry design skins. Outfit was, see, everybody, they just on code. Okay? We not liking Burberry today? Take it off the stuff. Take it off the video games. We not going to sit here and patronize it no more. They don't have their celebrities out here saying, I don't care what y'all say. I'm going to wear my Versace anyway.
I'm about to go in the Gucci.
You still supporting after the whole controversy?
What controversy? And my thing is this: I like to live life and do what I like to do. I'm not no follower. Everybody say wear this or don't wear this. I'm wearing what I want to wear. Love it. I love it. I love it.
He spent a damn fortune at Gucci.
We all know racism still exists, but that's not going to stop my drive. Everybody gonna boycott. I say, guess what? Well, this boy gonna get on a yacht and live life.
Now, I'm with the boycott. I'm with all boycotts.
But how long are you for the boycott?
No Gucci for life for me. I mean, yeah.
Well, we pick our own battles.
Some of y'all would have turned coat on Harriet Tubman. Some of y'all would have asked Toussaint to stop the violence. Some of y'all would have said Ali is a coward for not going to Vietnam. Some of y'all would have countered James with I am your Negro. Some of y'all would have still rode the bus during the Montgomery bus boycott. Some of y'all would have dimed out Asada. Some of y'all would have complained about him antagonizing white people with all the marches. Some of y'all would have been mad Malcolm was telling white folks off to their faces. Some of y'all would have said that's what he get. Some of y'all would have said that's what he get too. Some of y'all would have said, ew, why are they doing that? Some of y'all would have called this man a terrorist. Some of y'all swore he wasn't even good, then watched the Cowboys for the last 5 years. Some of y'all would have been like, ew, he's Muslim. I believe in Christ. Some of y'all would have been like, but he's not Michael Jordan. And finally, some of y'all would have been like, hey, let's wait and see where they take us.
I'm going to this Gucci store. No, all of them got together and put their foot on Versace neck and put their foot on whatever designer they felt insulted them. However, so slight the insult might have been. So this is hitting both fast fashion and high end. How much of the fashion world is involved? Potentially most of it. So far, Adidas, Nike, Converse, Burberry have all been swept up in the crisis. Even the ban. Additional companies like Patagonia, PHV, Marks & Spencer, The Gap have announced that they did not source material from Xinjiang and officially take stands against human rights abuses. This week, however, several brands, including BF Corp, Inditex, which owns Zara, and PHV all quietly removed their policies against forced labor on their websites. That seems squirrely. Is this likely to escalate? Brands seem to be concerned that the answer is yes. Since apparently fearful of offending Chinese government, for some companies proactively announced that they will continue buying cotton from Xinjiang. Hugo Boss, the German company, I'm sure they have no problem supporting a company. Hugo Boss, the German company whose suiting is a de facto uniform for the financial world, posted a statement on Weibo saying, we will continue to purchase and support Xinjiang cotton, even though last fall the company had announced it was no longer sourcing from the region. Muji, the Japanese brand, is also proudly touting the use of Xinjiang cotton in its Chinese website, as is Uniqlo. Wait, I get playing possum, but why would a company publicly pledge its allegiance to Xinjiang cotton? It's about the Benjamins. According to a report from Bain & Company released last December, China is expected to be the world's largest luxury market by 2025. That means that they are going to be the largest consumers of luxury goods. Last year, it was only part of the world to report on year-on-year growth, with the luxury market reaching 44 billion euros, which is $52.2 billion. That's why they bowed down. Is anyone going to come out of this well? One set winners could be Chinese fashion industry, which has long played second fiddle to Western brands. The frustration of many businesses there, shares in Chinese apparel groups and textile companies with ties to Xinjiang rallied this week, and the backlash gained pace. And more than 20 Chinese brands publicly made statements touting their support for Chinese cotton.
每天，当我蜷缩在这个城市里的时候，我的自豪感会油然而生。
How happy the Uyghurs are, or that's what you'd think if you believed the propaganda videos that crop up on the official Twitter feed of the Chinese news agency Xinhua. The Muslim Uyghurs are portrayed as prospering, living free lives. No mention of the harsh lockdown during COVID-19. But distressing recent videos Uyghurs themselves have posted tell a different story. This desperate man says he and his wife and children are starving. Uyghurs were barely allowed to leave their homes during the COVID-19 lockdown. A Chinese woman tells this Uyghur man to get back inside. What do we do when we're hungry, he says. Eat the building? Since 2017, up to 1 million Uyghurs have been placed in what some call concentration camps and the Chinese government calls vocational education centers. Now the authorities have stepped up their program to disperse Uyghurs around China, far from their families.
During the post-COVID-19 or during last several months, starting from February, March, not only has China failed to empty its concentration camps for people's safety, but China has sent massive numbers of Uyghurs to China proper to work as slaves.
This propaganda video from February says 179 migrant workers are leaving Xinjiang for Fujian in China's east. Reports suggest that the workers are paid, but have no choice about going to the factories. Videos uncovered by the investigative news organization Coda Story also show groups of Uyghurs being sent away. But listen to the soundtrack, a Chinese version of the old Italian freedom anthem, Bella Ciao. These videos are posted on social media by Uyghurs who are not happy to be bused to factories far from home.
What's really troubling is, they call these Uyghur workers batches. They say they have 500 or 300 workers available to be hired in 15 days. They can be delivered within a week or 2 weeks, and then they can withstand hardship. And they promise if you hire these workers, there will be no staff loss.
Most labor transfers reportedly happen within Xinjiang itself. But increasingly, Uyghurs are being moved from their native region to China's manufacturing belt in the east, to work in factories in places like Qingdao, Fuzhou and Guangzhou, supplying some of the world's biggest brands. China has used Xinjiang as a testing ground for digital surveillance. Today, the State Department announced sanctions on some employees of tech companies, including Huawei, for involvement in human rights abuse against Uyghurs. Huawei maintains that its operations in Xinjiang's security sector are only through third parties.
When we think about Huawei, it's not just about security. It's not just about national security. It's also about the ethics and what their services are being used for and who their services are being used on.
The Chinese government is determined that the Uyghurs should assimilate, marry Han Chinese who've been encouraged to move to Xinjiang. They must learn to be obedient communists, to forget their religion and culture, and any thoughts of defying the Chinese state.
Bye.